Hello, and welcome back to the Objective Epistemology Podcast. Today's episode is something I've been meaning to discuss for a very long time, and now this topic has hit home again, and in the most disturbing kind of way. The contradiction with compelled preferred pronouns and the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. For those of you who need a reminder, the First Amendment recognizes that Americans have an inalienable right to the freedom of speech. This also means that there is no authority anywhere that can compel an individual to speak. Another way to say this is that the state cannot adjudicate what my reason is to be purposed for. I would like to tell you my personal story in hopes that my story helps you understand a new perspective on this pressing social disaster. Let me first start by stating that I am a teacher, and second, that when I hear the words preferred pronouns, I hear the words gateway drugs and associate this with mental illness and psychological trauma, hormonal sterilization, and genital mutilation. When applied to minor students, I consider the words affirming a student's gender identity with affirming a student's mental illness, and I consider affirming mental illness a form of child abuse. I first encountered this issue about 5 years ago when I was working at an inner-city school in San Diego, California. Halfway through the school year, a student was added to one of my piano classes. She was a small, pale, skinny young lady with a short haircut that looked like she had recently cut it herself in haste. She was a very needy young lady and always sought attention from anyone that was willing to entertain her. After about a month, one day she came into my classroom wearing a Raggedy Ann wig. Raggedy Ann was a cloth doll toy from yesteryear. If the name doesn't ring a bell, Googling it would add considerable context to this strangeness of this event. She sat at one of the pianos near the front of my classroom while waiting for someone to ask her about her bright red wig made from yarn. Needless to say, the students were curious and estranged by her choice of wigs. Not long after that day, and after I worked hard to get to know her, I asked her where she had lived before and how she had come to choose this school. She was a very open student and proceeded to tell me that she had not been attending school for longer than was legal and was traveling around with her father. She said that her father was a truck driver and she lived with him and her younger brother in the cab of his semi-truck. She told me that she didn't think her father cared much about her and preferred her brother over her. From day one, she looked like she had lived a very difficult life. Some days she would dress like an exaggerated little boy, like something you would see a 5-year-old wearing for a Christmas card photo shoot. And some days, like a child's doll from the 80s, and some days she would wear a ratty old clothing and her bright red wig. One day, things changed, and she came to the class dressed like Pennywise the Clown. Obviously, this made the other kids uncomfortable, and she received some ridicule. It seemed like she would do just about anything for attention. Maybe a week later, and just after class had started, a man walked into my room and introduced himself as this student's social worker. At that time in my career, I'd never had a social worker come to talk to me in my classroom unannounced. As soon as he entered my classroom, I got a strange vibe from him. The professional thing to do is to set up a meeting with a teacher on their planning period, not interrupt class. He asked me to step outside with him because he needed to tell me something. Just outside the classroom door, this man proceeded to tell me that this student wanted to be called or wanted to be referred to as they, them. I had never heard such a request, and I was completely confused and bewildered. My first thought was that this student was suffering from a multiple personality disorder and wanted to be addressed as if she were a multiple person, like the proverbial we. I had no idea of what was coming down the path, and I had no idea how dialectical idealism progressed and brought forth the contradictions. I told the social worker that I had no idea what he was talking about, and that they them refers to a group of people, or to an individual that you know nothing about. He then said that this student is non-binary. I just remember staring at him waiting for an explanation, and he said the student is not identifying as a girl or a boy. The look on my face hearing this for the first time must have been priceless. I remember saying something like, "What the hell are you saying? Are you having a stroke right now? Should I call 911? This is when the man started threatening me. He said something to the effect that if you don't use the student's preferred pronouns, you can be arrested and charged with a Title IX violation. I said something like, we live in America, and you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about, and you need to leave my classroom. It was the strangest interaction I had had as a teacher up to that point in my career. I never saw that man again, but I did find out something else about him. When I went back into my classroom, one of my students said that he knew the guy, and he wanted to tell me something about him. He told me that the social worker used to work at the school when his brother went here, and that the social worker was moved to another school because he was allegedly caught having gay sex with some of the boys he was working with. Come to find out that instead of charging this man with rape, the school district just moved him to another school until all the students he had offended had graduated. Now, I could not corroborate any of this story, but the student that told me was trustworthy and knew too many details to be making this up. After a few months had gone by, I came to find out that this young lady had allegedly been repeatedly raped and pimped out by her father to other truck drivers while they were on the road. This student was not trans or non-binary. This student was mentally ill and had been severely abused. Instead of helping this student recover a sense of self, the social worker was promoting his cult religion of Gnostic queer Marxism and grooming a child into his cult teachings. This is the epitome of pure evil, and at that time, I didn't understand anything about this insidious network of extreme radical child abusers. At the end of that school year, and on the last day of school, all of the administration at the school were escorted off campus by the police relieved of duty. All the administrators' administration credentials were revoked, and instead of firing them all, the district reassigned all of them as teachers and placed them back into the classroom at different schools. That principal, a few years later, was arrested and charged with soliciting sex from a 14-year-old boy. There's a YouTube channel that catches predators, and he was one of those catches. The school district told the students at the school he was working at as a teacher that he had been allegedly caught, drunk driving and would not be returning to the school. Now for the more recent event. I now work as a teacher in a different state and for a different district. At the school I now work at, on Mondays, we have our weekly teacher meetings. The last Monday meeting in January 2023, I saw on the agenda that the school social worker was going to bring up the issue of students' preferred pronouns. I was sitting with a coworker friend that thinks like me, and I pointed to the agenda item. We both shared that look of disgust. The social worker proceeded to tell us that the school board has mandated that all staff must use students' preferred pronouns, otherwise it would be a Title IX violation. Another teacher asked, how can I know from day to day or minute to minute? I have few students that change their pronouns every day or every hour. The vice principal spoke and said something like, you just have to do it. That's when my friend said out loud, this is ridiculous. I backed him up, and I said, I agree. And then I stated that preferred pronouns are queer Marxism and a religion. I then said that the mandating this practice violates multiple constitutional rights, especially free speech, and very possibly the Establishment Clause. That is when I got dagger eyes from many staff members, and some of them I know to be Marxists, scoffed and laughed at me and said I had no idea what I was talking about. It was very awkward and petty, and I left the meeting with even more dislike and distaste for some of the individuals I work with. Later that day, my friend and I received emails stating that our principal wanted to have a meeting with us during each of our planning periods the next day. When school ended, I found my principal in the parking lot and asked him what the nature of the meeting was going to be about. He told me that he needed to cover his ass and personally give me the district's policy on discrimination and compelled use of student-preferred pronouns. We chatted for a while, and I found out that this man doesn't know or understand the Constitution and doesn't have a clue about critical queer Marxism or the Gnostic cult that is formed around the ideas of critical Marxism in general. I also concretize my identification that my principal is also a raging narcissist. During my planning period, I went to my principal's office to find him and the vice principal in the room. Now, what they didn't know is that the state we live in is a one-party consent state, and I was recording our conversation on my phone. I figured that if they were going to back me in a corner against my will for a Maoist-style struggle session, I was going to attempt to bait them into admitting that they wanted to violate my First Amendment rights to free speech, because I was certain that neither of them actually understood or considered the Constitution to be the law of the land. I tried to keep them talking by asking them carefully thought-out questions I had thought of in advance, but since I'm not great at under duress, I stumbled through some of the things I wanted to say. I attempted at times to pretend to agree with them, with the hope of catching them violating my rights, while trying to remain respectful enough not to piss them off and get fired. I actually like my job. I don't like most of the people I work with. Let's listen to the recording.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Water, anybody?
Good, yeah.
Phone?
No, but... Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, a little tired today. Yeah.
The wireless is being fun again.
So
I'm gonna take some notes about our conversation. So just so you know.
Cool.
I just want to, yesterday, I think the situation, I understand it. I put a lot of thought to this. A couple things I just want to accomplish today. You and I started this conversation last night.
Yep.
Our guiding force, and I talked to my executive director today because I had my mid-year. He just left like 20 minutes ago.
Cool.
And I played a scenario. I didn't include any names. I just played a scenario. I said, well, here's my thinking. Here's what I'm going to do today. He said, no, you're spot on. Board policy is our guiding principles. And you and I talked about that last night. It's what when we sign our contracts, we are employees of the district, and board policy, I don't care what school district you're in, all school districts have board policy. That is our bylaws, so to speak, for how we conduct business, and everything from curriculum, instruction, community, behavior and discipline codes of conduct, how we communicate, how we share information, everything is board policy. So I look at these conversations not as a means of being punitive, because I'm not a punitive person. I don't think I am.
For a little context, this man is punitive. He has implemented a thing he calls the F list, which is positive punishment. Instead of helping the kids get off the F list by giving them rewards, our school allows kids to leave the campus for lunch, and if they have an F, they have to stay in the school for lunch. And the kids pile up on the F list, and then a bunch of them get bitter and unhappy, and some never make it off the F list. It's because he's using positive punishment, which is the worst kind of reinforcer that you can use.
But I look at it in terms of it's an opportunity to provide resources to support the discussion. So what I've done, and I've given you a copy, as I told you last night, I gave you a copy. These are district documents. They're public documents. These are shared documents that just, and I'm not asking you to study them. I just believe that if I'm going to talk about a policy, then I should provide you with the policy so that you can read how it reads in terms of.
I'm pretty sure I read all of these.
Yeah, well, and you may have, but I wanted to furnish you with them just the same. I'm not going to read through them today. They're simply for your resource. I want to go back to the initial situation, and I want to put context. You may or may not know, but we meet with our mental health team in meetings, just like we have staff meetings that we're all inclusive of. We meet with our mental health team because it's a different part of our program, and they provide different services to us.
Yeah.
At a recent mental health meeting, I had started a discussion around the fact that I've noticed, because we interview every kid that comes in, I've noticed, and I told this as well, we've been seeing more kids that are identifying opposite their biological gender. Non-binary is the term we use. Even in C, they will use pronouns of choice. Even in our application, they can use pronouns of choice.
Sure.
You and I did talk about that last night. You clearly articulated how you handle it by just using the student's name, and I said that's extremely appropriate. I just said my concern is, and it's not a concern I share because I think it's a concern for you, it's a concern I share in my own practice, is that sometimes I struggle in daily semantics.
Why are you telling me this?
And I think one of our teachers voiced that yesterday when he said, sometimes I just don't know, and then I make a mistake and I feel bad.
Talk to him, not me.
And I said, well, no. The word I use, the phrase I use, when we engage with our kids who are identifying differently than their biological determination.
So you can't tell, right?
You can't.
So
But if they bring this situation to the forefront and say, I prefer to be called this, we have to honor that.
According to the First Amendment, we don't have to honor that. We don't have to do any kind of compelled speech.
what are the changes every single day? And you can't.
Well, you're right.
I know I'm right.
Potentially that could be an issue, but I think we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
We have had that, and we
That
honor it.
Yeah. But,
That's
I've heard you
our,
I've heard a lot of people
here's-
it's
saying.
not,
yeah.
our job is just to honor it.
No, our job is to teach kids, and we have a First Amendment right, and we don't have to honor it. This is a violation of my First Amendment right if they are going to become punitive for me not honoring it.
Here's
Yes.
what,
Our
Here's-
job, based on
yeah.
what's in here, is to honor it.
Can you show me that? I was curious because I read through all of these and I can't find where that is
well,
in here.
the
But I'm
part
curious.
I was trying to the point I was trying to make, if you let me finish this thought,
Yeah.
is, and I would have told this to yesterday's too, because he's the one that said, well, sometimes I slip.
Right here.
I'll let you do that first, because I want to make
They
sure,
want the following
I want to make sure my
language.
point's getting made.
It's both in society and with the student.
So was this be aware of evolving language around gender and try to use
This is a suggestion.
the most current respectful terms?
Yep.
Try to use. That's the key point, is that they're not mandating speech. So it's not the district doing this. This is the vice principal and the principal attempting to mandate speech, which is a violation of the First Amendment.
So
It doesn't say that it
That
can't
can
change.
evolve with society or evolve with the individual.
yeah, it says try to use.
Well, yeah, that's the
Right.
point I'm
Yeah.
trying to make, but you
Trying.
I'm trying to finish my thought.
No.
But what I was worried about is when they say
Like I had mentioned before, neither my vice principal or principal have any idea of what the Constitution says, because they just trample all over it. And so this is me schooling them in constitutional law. I'm definitely no expert, but at least I had to take a constitutional oath and tests and all the things to become a teacher. That's just what we have to do to get a credential.
compelled speech is a whole different
Here,
thing in comparison to try is more of
here's what I was trying
guideline
to-
for we'd like this to be the case, but compelled speech is if you don't use it, consequences.
So later the next day, I received the letter from my principal, and yes, there looks like there could be consequences if I don't follow their edicts, and they let them violate my First Amendment constitutional right. They're saying that if I don't use preferred pronouns, that this could be reflected in my evaluations.
And so that's the problem, is that the state cannot adjudicate what my reason is to be purposed for, because that's the essence of the First Amendment. It's true, and the state cannot compel speech. So that was the thing that I want to make sure was stated, because recommending it, totally fine. Anybody can recommend anything with being, just being nice. I don't want to offend
No.
kids. I love all the
I
kids.
think that's,
He thinks constitutional law is a tangent. How disrespectful can you be to America?
before we went off on a tangent, this is the point I was trying to make that I didn't get to finish. what I would always ask any of you to do, and I practice myself, is when I engage kids, because I screw up and mess up from time to time, I think we always have to go with the idea or notion of positive intent, which means when Max used to be Molly, I transitioned in my mind that he prefers to be called Max. But for that first month or so, I kept saying Molly or her, and I would look at Max, and Max said,
Molly is a beautiful young lady, and I think one day she will make a man very happy. I highly doubt that she is non-binary, trans. I think she watches too much fucking TikTok, and I think that she's been brainwashed because she's really smart. She's just super naive, and it makes me really sad because I don't see a boy in her at all. Not at all.
It's okay, Mr. Broger. I know sometimes it's confusing. And I said, well, I'm trying. She goes, where you? I just said it. She goes, he goes.
I'll tell you why he makes a mistake a lot. Because it's fucking bullshit. Because this is agnostic, critical Marxist, queer theory bullshit. This is all made up. This is all special knowledge bullshit. And it's gotten into the fucking school system, and it's fucking everyone's life.
Why do you make that mistake a lot, though?
But the thing is, I'm exercising
positive intent. That's a deepity. It means nothing. It's basically some Marxist jargon to make you feel like you're doing something important, but you're fucking not. You're just bowing down to the cult religion of Gnostic Marxism. So fuck you.
Positive intent. Mistakes will happen. Mistakes will happen.
It
should never be a matter of, I know that you want the pronoun him now instead of her, but I'm going to call you her because that's just where I'm at.
Think back to, I mean, I know both of you guys are older than I am. When can you pinpoint the year or date when you recognize that this was a major change?
What I should have asked was, when did you recognize that this had entered the schools and started fucking up everything?
When I recognized what was a major change.
Because growing up, I only started experiencing this probably in the last 4
You mean gender or identity changes?
What you really meant to say was queer Marxism entering the schools and, again, fucking everything up.
Yeah. When they decided to start using neo-pronouns and all of these things.
Now enters the master of logical fallacies, and this is just another one of her strawmans. It's ridiculous. Instead of being an intellectual and steel-manning the argument and giving the best argument, she always gives the worst. It's terrible.
So there is a doctor, he has passed away recently, who was doing transgender operations, transitioning surgeries for the past 50 years in Trinidad.
Oh, totally. That's been around for a long time, yeah.
And so it was a closet movement, but it was there. It just might not have been in your circles.
My VP is a Marxist and a condescending asshole, because this is how she talks to most people and the kids as well. It kind of sucks.
Yeah, I don't know that I think that through all of my teaching, almost 20 years, it's only in the last couple of years that I've started to experience this. And even in my whole career through schooling, I never knew anybody like that. I did when I grew up, knew one friend, she was a professor, mother of my friend, who did have a transgender friend. That was my first experience.
Now, I'm a music teacher, and I guess in the arts, you can't really get away from working with gay people, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with being gay. I think gay people are born gay. I think that that's also something you can view in the animal community. When I was a child growing up, I had a friend whose parents had an aviary, and that aviary had a ton of birds in it, and every mating season there was always a male bird that would decide that it needed to sit on all of the females' eggs in their nest. This is just one example.
Think about that too. 100 years ago, there were no openly gay individuals either.
That's really
The
sad.
term coming out of the closet
So-
used to be the
I know.
It doesn't
No, I know, I know.
mean, it doesn't
No.
mean they weren't there or
Yeah.
they didn't want something, it
Right.
just, so.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Wasting time.
Now,
Yeah.
I guess the point of all this
Is there
there's
really a point?
a couple things I just want to accomplish in our discussion today. First and foremost, I want it to be understood that as educated,
I guess being educated means you can just trample all over the Constitution because you just don't need to know anything about it. It's kind of unfortunate.
free-thinking people, which we all are.
Yeah.
We all have our beliefs. We all have things that we hold near and dear to our hearts. We all have things that
You'll have to abide
we
by the
have
Constitution.
chosen to align with through our studies and our intellectual capacities, and they just
Okay.
align to our own thinking. It could be a matter of influence from the way we were raised. It could be a matter of influence from others. It could be just our own genuine thoughts and
Okay.
ideas about anything. We all have that as part of our being. All of us have that. I have mine. You wouldn't know whether I was religious, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, agnostic,
Off topic.
but my beliefs are there. I just don't openly share them because in a public forum, which is public education,
I'll be generous and say, yes, we aren't supposed to be teaching religion. Like I said, that is a violation of the Establishment Clause. But we are individuals, and all of our values are always going to be with us. We don't leave our First Amendment at the door as teachers when we come to work.
we don't have that luxury. We're not allowed that luxury.
Oh, but we do. We don't give up our First Amendment rights being a teacher.
In our evaluation tools that we evaluate every staff member, including myself and Becca, we get evaluated on this as well.
At this moment, I was like, I feel like Beavis, are you threatening me?
Is creating a safe environment for all.
Yeah.
And kids, the reason why I believe in my heart we're successful is because kids do feel accepted here. They understand that they come in with lots of baggage. But they also understand, for the most part, and we're not perfect, but for the most part, we genuinely take those things into consideration and we treat them as individuals.
Duh, I'm an individualist.
Is it unique to a school? Probably more so than a big school. Because in a big school, that's harder to pull off. But here, the kids know us better. We know them better. We're on first name basis with everybody here.
So I'm kind of curious. I think
I'm not on board with the queer Gnostic Marxism. I was just trying to move the conversation along because I still had never gotten a reason why we were having this meeting, other than the principal wanted to cover his ass.
I'm on board. I get where this is going, but what exactly? Why are we?
Why do you think it's okay
Having
to
this-
waste my time?
So, one of my concerns.
Yeah.
So, first of all, we were having a staff meeting yesterday, and one of our staff members was presenting information that she was asked to present.
Wow, that is a slippery as fuck way to say that, because she wasn't just presenting information. She was raining down edict from what they pretended to be the district, but it's not the district, it's the VP and the principal, or probably just the VP, because she's a fucking Marxist.
Yeah.
And it was just resources. She
That's
was
all it
not
is.
she was not presenting anything else. She wasn't telling her opinion. And you
I was having heart palpitations at this moment when I started hearing this bullshit, because this is a complete lie. The lady who was presenting this information was telling us that this was compelled speech, and it was fucked up, and it was hurting my feelings. And I don't say that often because I don't give a fuck about feelings, but they were hurting my fucking feelings.
spoke out.
Oh no, I spoke out. If you haven't listened to James Lindsay talk about Herbert Marcuse's repressive tolerance, then you need to go check it out, because this is the essence of fucking repressive tolerance to the T.
And said it was ridiculous.
Here's where she conflates what my friend said, and he wasn't wrong, and what I said, but she's too dumb to know the difference, and that's, oh my god, so fucking sad.
And started throwing out terminology.
Was I wrong? With the terminology?
To do that?
With the terminology.
I would question any reference to Marxism.
Oh my god, I was so fucking mad. I was like, you dumb fucking cunt. This is just Marxism to a T. This is like neo-Marxist. This is the postmodern version of what Marxism has become. And you're telling me that you don't know this and you're a fucking Marxist? You're a liar.
In regard to this, because Marx was all about everyone's the same.
For having a doctorate, this woman doesn't have any clue the essence and the abstractions of Marxism. It's so sad. She's just a fucking pawn.
It was not really about, he was not about differences.
Classes. He was the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and there was a class divide.
And he wanted to get rid of that.
Yes, but what a naive understanding of why. Fucking A.
But beyond that, your expression.
Pretty sure you meant my First Amendment right to speak. Okay.
Made it appear that you were against our board policy
by Marxism.
At this point, I had no interest in letting her diminish the idea that this is a fucking Marxist takeover of public education, and that seemed to be, at least from our previous conversations, the kind of thing that she was interested in.
Okay, but not by what was being shared.
Oh my god, I was so pissed off. This is when she was trying to conflate what was taking place versus what she wanted to take place. And she was just too chicken to actually say what she really meant. And I was so offended.
Because what was being shared were just resources.
You weren't forced to.
She was not.
Well, I read through them.
But
she was not. But she was. It was not a force. It was, here are some resources if you want.
If that's the disposition that she was actually trying to convey, it was piss poor. Like, when I heard this, I heard, this is compelled speech. And then, if you listen later in this conversation, she continues to promulgate compelled speech. I really just want to teach the kids about scales and modes and music composition and rhythm and why the Phrygian mode has a really fucking awesome sound, and like if you were to use all the chords and make a melody out of it, then like it's going to be interesting and innovative, because a lot of people don't do that. But that's just not what I'm doing here. I mean, I feel like I'm wasting my fucking time trying to talk about gender pronouns and Marxist ideology being stuffed down my fucking throat as a teacher, and I just don't give a shit. I don't care. I never wanted to learn about this stuff. I just realized that this was going to become a thing and that I was going to be confronted with it, and if I didn't understand this stuff, I was going to get railroaded, which is what's happening now. But I understand it, and they don't, and it's pathetic.
And your reaction in a public forum was...
I literally just spoke the words.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in that public forum...
I was speaking in a civil tone the entire time. I was screaming in my head.
Just expressing emotion.
So she had a problem with me expressing an emotion when she bombarded me with Marxist ideology and expected me just to fucking take it. And then when I decided I wasn't going to take it anymore, and I was screaming from that window, and I was like, I don't want to fucking do this. I think this is child abuse. She got pissed off, and now she's being punitive. More than just punitive, she's violating my First Amendment right. Try to remember, the state does not have the right to adjudicate what my reason is to be purposed for. And when I see this, my reason sees that this ideology is producing child abuse. They don't have a right to tell me I don't have a right. That's the essence of the First Amendment.
Well, what is a problem is there was nuclear fallout from the comments yesterday with our staff.
Holy fuck. What she really meant was there's nuclear fallout with the Marxists because you're calling them out. And you're not allowed to do that under my watch because I'm a fucking narcissist asshole cunt. And yeah, fuck you. Are you going to be punitive? Am I waiting for you to be punitive? Are you going to punish me for an ideology that you just don't want to hear? Because you know you're wrong. But if you were right, then none of this would happen. If you were objective, none of this would happen. If you had an objective epistemology, none of this would fucking happen. I'd just be sitting there and taking it because I'd love it if it was objective. But it's not, so I'm shitting in your face.
That was not the correct way to approach.
I was literally just speaking calmly.
Your concerns about what she was sharing.
Oh my god, if this isn't a fucking First Amendment violation, I don't even know what the fuck it is. Like, basically she's telling me I can't speak and that the state, which she represents, can adjudicate what my reason is to be purposed for. Oh, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, and fuck you. Then fuck yourself some more.
You've known me for a couple years now, and you probably realize I'm pretty flat affect.
Yep, I'm high-functioning autism. I'm on the spectrum. And yeah, I do have some deficits, and they do affect people. But that doesn't detract from my ability for inductive and deductive reason and logic. I hope you see that, but I don't give a fuck if you do or don't. It doesn't make a difference.
I don't show a lot of emotions.
Right.
But when there's a moment when if I do share something at that heightened level of emotion, you probably can bet that it's probably one of my deep emotional triggers when I hear these kind of things.
Okay.
And the study that I've been talking about that I've been doing since all of this has kind of happened has led me down a very interesting path. Do you know where the gender pronouns came from? Do you know the study?
Wow. I mean, it is the essence of everything that she is pushing in the school. Like, I mean, because she doesn't want to talk about it or identify where it came from, it just says so much. It's absurd because if she were to actually tell people where this came from, maybe I shouldn't assume that she actually knows. Maybe she's just a fucking pawn. She doesn't even have an idea of like why or what the people that are telling her that this is the thing, why she should push this in the school. She has a PhD. She's a fucking doctor or a doctor of philosophy, which I don't particularly respect just because she's not a medical doctor. And I think doctorates are just dumb unless you have a medical doctorate. I think it's a waste of money. I think that it's like a I smell my own farts kind of thing. And I think it's just ridiculous. But let's see what she has to say.
No, but that's not really, that's not the primary issue. The primary issue is how we behave in a public setting and
my voice sounded just like this meeting.
The way you expressed yourself.
Oh my, did I offend you? How sad. How sad it is.
Made it appear that you were against.
A long moment of contemplation.
Us requesting that our staff or offering resources for our staff to help them follow district policy to respect the way students wish to be called.
Now that was some mild mental gymnastics. I know it was stressful and difficult, but good for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have any idea why I would feel offended by it?
You've expressed a lot of your readings, and so yes, I am aware. However, there are ways that we
Ma'am, are you trying to adjudicate what my reason is to be purposed for? Because I think I just told you that the state, which you are actually acting as, doesn't have the power to do that thing. Why are you trying to do that?
That we react.
I really don't remember the last time I've raised my voice, so I don't really know what she's talking about.
Your reaction, because it was public like that caused a lot of hurt.
So when you say the word hurt, then it makes it okay to violate my First Amendment rights? Really? 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 You're going to go with that? Wow.
What if I felt hurt from the situation? Is my feelings not okay?
We're going to give you what we want
There's
to do
process.
is a process. So of
you
course,
come to us, or you go to, but you do it privately.
It was done on blast yesterday, and it was awkward because it was done on blast.
So when you say the word hurt, then it makes it okay to violate my First Amendment rights? Really? 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 You're going to go with that? Wow. I think on blast means it offended me as the principal, and well, I'm going to trample your First Amendment rights because I don't like what you're saying, and I'm the fucking dominant monkey here.
There were people in the room that may not adhere to your thoughts on this, nor hers.
Sure.
But I think because we're a small school and we are more closer knit and we are more intimate in our relationships with our staff and our kids, we should give ourselves enough grace, and I think that's the appropriate word, give us enough grace to process our thoughts individually with a person. It was put on blast yesterday, which all those people did not need to hear that.
Here's a repressive tolerance moment. My principal just didn't give a shit about my emotions. I don't know if it's because the VP is a Marxist and basically wears the pants, and he pretends like she doesn't, but she does, and she just tells him what to do. And because I found this offensive and she wears the pants, he just doesn't want to engage, or pretends like he does, but doesn't really want to engage because he's a puss.
What if I also felt identical to what you're saying? You guys felt like it was on blast to her, but when you put that in an agenda without prompting me, knowing that I have a deep hatred for Marxism, and when I see that added to the agenda and I open it up and I'm surprised, and then it's talked about, I feel, even though the
like I actually spoke in a meeting
when she brought that to my attention, I felt the exact same thing she felt when you feel like it was an explosive thing from said that. I feel it's just as hurt when you bring that kind of things into the.
But how can we ignore the fact that it's something that we have to deal with?
She was just bringing resources to comply with district policy, which is that we do our best to respect.
That was a problem. None of this is decided fact, yet it was presented as if though this is the fact, and this is how everyone should be dealing with this situation, and you're behind. And so these resources are here to catch you up, and fuck you because you're a bigot. You're a fucking bigot. They didn't say that, but that was the intention. That was like how this was presented. It was like, this has already been decided, and you're behind. You're behind. You're behind. Fuck you.
But it could have been different. When you bring it in as if it is already decided fact that this is the thing that should be part of society, versus saying this is how the district sees it. If you look at the Constitution, you don't have to do this. Being like the arbiter of both sides.
With principalship comes great responsibility and neutrality if you want to be a great principal. But if you're a fucking ideologue and you pretend to be a conservative, which I don't really give a fuck, but if you're going to speak that thing and then contradict it and then bring in radical leftist ideology in the form of occult religion, Gnosticism, in the form of Gnostic queer Marxism, and then pretend like you're not that thing, fuck you.
Would seem to be more of a tactful way to bring up something like that, because by imposing it as just this is how it is and this hasn't been taking place, therefore here are resources so that you can get on board, instead of saying here are two different versions of this, some people see it this way, other people see it this way, and so we recognize that two people see this in different means, how can we have a conversation so that we can fix this? And so that would have, to me, I would have felt fine if somebody would have brought that up and said, I'd like to have a discussion about this and see where it lands. Totally different thing. But when it's brought in as if though this is the gospel.
Objectivity is key, and if you don't realize the magnitude of why being objective is so important in this situation, take a check. Queer Gnosticism is their gospel. This is the thing that you should take a look at, because when objectivity is thrown out the window, you don't have reason, and reason is the thing that runs the world. At least it should be.
But it is district policy that we respect, and the Constitution does not give us the right to say anything we want at any time in any situation.
Oh my, here comes the fucking straw man. So when you get on a plane, you are entering another person or corporation's property, and you don't have to go there. There's no compulsion. But when you decide that what they offer, because they have property that can do things for you in a particular kind of way, and you're willing to pay them to use that property in that particular kind of way, and you're like, hey, I like what you have. And they're like, hey, you have to give up some of these rights that you normally have if you want to use my property. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There should never be anything wrong with that, because property rights are fundamental. But to a fucking Marxist like this asshole, this fucking cunt, like, she doesn't care. She's conflating them because it's a straw man. She's using it as a straw man to erode your reason. But all you have is your reason. And she knows that kind of viscerally, because I don't think she really gets what it all means. I think she's just a fucking idiot with a PhD, but she doesn't recognize the fundamental attributes of freedom. And that's a problem. And it's displayed right here for your judgment, for your observation.
There is always a filter that needs to be applied. Try saying bomb on an airplane, and you will learn that lesson really quickly.
I broke down here. I just wasn't ready for a ridiculous response like that. It was pathetic, but in my mind, I just didn't see it. I don't know. Sorry.
No, you can say it. It just means that there might be some consequences.
There's repercussions.
Yeah, I mean,
It doesn't give us carte blanche to say whatever we want, whenever we want.
This is where she conflates compelled speech, telling people what they have to say, with what they could say in a particular environment that could jeopardize other individuals' rights. And so they can't say that there. It's a totally different thing. But that's where she is, and that's what she wants me to think I'm doing, when she's actually compelling me to do the opposite, which is to speak things that I don't believe are true. That's a major First Amendment violation, and she doesn't know the difference. So, fuck you.
Without potentially deep repercussions. And so
I think it's
what
the negative,
was being
though.
offered as resources to comply with district policy.
Compelled speech.
Compelled speech, not compelled speech. Compelled speech, not compelled speech. Wow. Contradiction. In terms, how sad.
That's the difference between telling people what they have to say versus people saying things in the wrong place. Because, like you said, we have a freedom of speech, right? But you can't compel people to speak. You can tell them that they can't do the speaking at that time or given place, but you can't compel them to speak in a certain kind of way. It's a very fine line, but it's a difference in.
So this is a blatant disregard for the Constitution. Yeah, like, I don't have to abide by any of this. And it's sad that an idiot like this is in a position of power, and she wants to be a dictator and tell me what I have to say because it aligns with her Gnostic, critical, Marxist queer theory, and she's convinced that I need to just fucking fall in line and be that guy, and I'll never be that guy. Never.
But
Well,
the
but how-
district sets up expectations for how we treat and speak to our students who are transgender and or non-binary. The resources she was providing were only that, to follow
Do you have those real quick?
guidelines.
Just listen to her. It's like, follow. Get in line, you fucking pleb. You're a piece of shit, and this is how it's supposed to be. Because I'm a Marxist asshole. Gnostic Marxist with special knowledge that you don't have, and yet you need it to make it.
Can you pull them up real quick?
The
PDF?
resources?
Yeah, pull up the PDF real quick. I want to take a look. There's a part of it that I found fascinating.
I guess my thing is, we can almost have this conversation about anybody, and how are we ever going to have conversations as a staff about anything? What if people feel sideways about
Low IQ. Next.
drug addiction and drug use, and it triggers emotion in them? Are we not to talk about it for the benefit of our kids? We have to make
I think
sure.
talking about everything is always open to talk about. It makes me very happy to make discussion.
So contradicting what he thinks should be right is wrong. That's how this played out. It's unfortunate, but yeah, I don't know what to say.
But the way that it was responded to yesterday was almost inhibiting discussion.
Wrong.
Because if you were seeking a deeper resolve,
Our meetings were always advertised as a open forum, except when what we say doesn't mix with what the admin likes to hear. And then it's like, don't say that. Shut the fuck up. It's not what we're promoting here. That's not our thing. So don't try it.
It would have
you
been
could have
thought
went and talked
differently.
to or you could have went and talked to me and processed and not made it such.
If it's not completely apparent after listening to these people talk, coming to them with questions or concerns, they don't listen at all. They don't care to listen. They just don't like people talking about things they don't like to hear in front of other people.
It was awkward the way that played out in the staff meeting yesterday. People walked away. That was not the way I wanted to start the week with people. They walked away feeling defeated.
My friend and I did feel defeated, and it was very inappropriate for administration to take a side, especially for a very radical leftist side.
And I was like, wait, all it was providing a resource. It wasn't something any of you had to look at. It was simply a resource. If you want to look at it, look at it. If you don't. She totally presented it that way.
No, she did not present it that way. She presented it as if though it were fact, and that there were people that weren't doing this, and therefore they needed to read this and catch up because consequences. I really resent being lied to, and I really resent someone telling me a lie knowing that I know the difference.
And I asked her to.
I get that.
And I don't have to run a filter through you guys because the agenda is a living agenda, and you guys could have looked at it when I sent it out Sunday morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. I sent it to you guys. You could have
never
seen
expected to find something like that.
But it's there.
Why would
you
you
can always
not, considering we have a growing number of students who identify as non-binary or a
the implication of compelled
gender.
speech. I think that was one of the most offensive ideas that came from bringing that to our attention in the way that I interpreted it. And I find compelled speech one of the most important things another person can do to somebody else. That is, did you find the PDF document?
I am.
If you have it.
So
The problem is, she wasn't mandating that you read it.
This is another lie. They had her read this, telling us that we have to use a child's preferred pronouns. or consequences. And now she's backpedaling. And I don't know how she doesn't know that I already know that she's backpedaling. This is narcissistic behavior.
She was providing it as an optional resource.
But even the district, like you know that in Colorado, all teachers have to take an oath to uphold the Constitution to get their credential.
Yeah.
So that was one of the Senate bills that passed. And so the Senate bill supersedes anything that any individual district within the state, even though they're all autonomous in some ways, they can never, the Constitution will always supersede any of the things that they say. And so if the district has guidelines and they say, we would prefer that you use preferred speech, that's absolutely fine. That would never cause an issue. But if they say, you have to use preferred pronouns, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do that.
If they're going to lie to me, I might as well lie to them. They don't deserve my respect. I'm never going to use preferred pronouns. It's just never going to happen.
I'm saying this is more of a theoretical thing, saying because someone is compelling me to do this, my obligation first is always to the Constitution. Because to keep my credential active and legitimate, I hold that oath to be very important to me. And if I find that anybody, it's kind of like, I'm not saying this is the Nuremberg trials because that's extensive, but if people say, I'm only doing my job, I'm just following orders. If the district is in violation of a particular part of the Constitution, they may not see it this way, but if they're just saying, we prefer you do this, but you don't have to do this, totally different issue. If they say this is something you must do, and if you don't do that, there'll be punitive actions taken against you, that is a wholly different.
At this point, she is trying to tell me that I would be in violation of a Title IX discrimination clause. That's not true. The Department of Education had a memo sent out specifically stating from the Office of Civil Rights, stating that not using anyone's preferred pronouns cannot be a violation because it's a First Amendment right. And in the Supreme Court case, Mattel versus Tam, they ruled that there is no such thing as hate speech, and discriminatory speech is protected under the First Amendment. People may not like it, but they can't do anything about it. If they do, it's a First Amendment violation. And this is where she's trying to justify her desire to violate my First Amendment because she's acting as an agent of the state.
Can you use discriminatory language?
Discriminatory language.
Can you use discriminatory language?
Anybody can if they would like to.
Can you use it in your school setting without repercussions?
I would never do that.
Can you without repercussions?
Anybody can say anything they would like.
Can you without repercussions?
I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court said that there is no such thing as hate speech. That hate speech is not a thing in America. And so if you also look at even in Kansas, there was a thing where the district was attempting to...
You didn't answer my question. Can you use discriminatory language?
They tried to.
You can be released. Our policy aligns with and is right beside Colorado state law, which aligns with federal law.
Now she's just making shit up. And she's being threatening. This is my administrator and my evaluator, and she's making veiled threats to me. This is also bullying, and this is hostile work environment.
And all three of those are together with our policy. Our federal law is based on the Constitution, and this is long-standing law.
What law is this? Because she's just pulling shit out of her ass right now and trying to bully me. This is pathetic. I guess you just have to be strong and wrong and just keep going with it. This is a typical reaction of a narcissist.
That is upheld, that talks about discriminatory language. So,
no, discriminatory language is protected speech under the First Amendment, and the Supreme Court, like I said, with the case study, Mattel versus Tam. If you want to go check that out, that's where it was ruled a First Amendment right, and people can just pound sand. The worst part is these individuals know that I'm an individualist, and I don't use discriminatory language because I see people as individuals. I don't see them as a race or gender or sex or class or any fucked up Marxist poop. James Lindsay was right. This is the iron law of woke projection.
The Constitution does not say you can say anything you want, no consequences.
So you're listening to a little dictator Marxist here, and she's fucking dead wrong. And that's evil. This lady's evil. After listening to this, I'm wondering if I have Stockholm Syndrome of some sort or another. For years, the students have been telling me that this lady is a bad person, and I've been sticking up for her. Oh man, I gotta rethink my life.
So it does not. It says you have freedom of speech, but there could be consequences.
Sometimes.
Based on choices.
Those consequences come in the form of maybe social ostracization, but they cannot come in the form of the government or a government facility punishing you for your free speech. That is what the Constitution protects you against. And so she's conflating this and threatening me. I have a feeling that down the road in my evaluations, she's going to look to see if she can pin me for not using pronouns. I think that this is where this is going.
There is a former news reporter from Atlanta who is still in jail because he got drunk and told the flight attendant on the plane that he had a bomb in his bag.
Okay. He
is in jail. His material, all of his equipment was taken to the end of the runway and incinerated.
Wow.
So
This is her trying to create another straw man. The difference is that a plane is private property, and when you buy a ticket to use that private property, you also sign away your rights willingly because you want to use another person or organization's property, and they are not the government. This is a completely different argument that she's trying to use as a straw man. Instead of steel manning me like a real person, like an honest person would, giving me the best argument, she's giving me one of the worst arguments. The reason that man is in jail is because that man violated another individual or lots of individuals' rights by threatening them with physical violence and with a device that was indiscriminatory.
Constitution says we can speak, but it does not say that no one has the right to limit that.
Did you hear that evil woman say that the exact opposite of the First Amendment? What a manipulative cunt.
That's also kind of the other side of this. It's different from compelling speech versus actually speaking things.
I've already explained to her that the government cannot compel speech, and that is the purpose of the First Amendment. And it just went right in and out. She just doesn't care. Either she knows and she's trying to be punitive and take my First Amendment away from me, or she's just dumb, or she's a narcissist and doesn't want to say that she's wrong.
So there is a fine line between that. I agree with you what you're saying. If you say things, there can be consequences.
Again, yeah, there's consequences. You may hurt some people's feelings, but it's totally different when it comes to the government trying to compel speech. You can speak and say anything you want in America. That is the First Amendment. That's where the violation's taking place.
But you cannot force people to say things.
No.
And that's a different perspective on the First Amendment.
Can I weigh in?
And so
I feel like I'm out of this conversation right now.
Kind of like always, you just don't really have anything new to say. You like to talk about yourself, and this doesn't have anything to do with you. It has everything to do with my First Amendment being violated, and you don't even notice. You don't even care. You don't even see it. The worst part is that you could have jumped in at any time and stopped her from putting her foot in her mouth, and you could have corrected her and said, "You're completely wrong, and you're going to get yourself in trouble. You should shut the fuck up."
I love that. I hope I'm not making you feel...
Well, no,
I love this.
I can't believe in the thick of it I was actually feeling bad for her. She was starting to visibly shake. Her hands were shaking, and she looked like she was scared. Going back and listening to this, I wonder if it's starting to dawn on her that she knows she's wrong and that she is violating my First Amendment, and she wants to continue now. And after listening to this, I'm just blown away.
You have a nuance that I don't agree with, because if a staff member is refusing to honor a student's request...
Okay, long pause. Now she's getting ready to threaten me again.
Then we have policies that say that is creating an unsafe environment.
I think now would be a good time if I were to read to you a document sent out by the United States Department of Education for the Office of Civil Rights. This was the Assistant Secretary. It was published on March 9th, 2020. It says the Honorable Mark E. Green, U.S. House of Representatives, Washington, D.C., 20515. Dear Representative Green, thank you for your letter to the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, dated October 1st, 2019, regarding Title IX of the Educational Amendment of 1972, Title IX. Your letter has been forwarded to the U.S. Department of Education's Department's Officer for Civil Rights, OCR, and I am pleased to respond on behalf of the Secretary. As you know, OCR is responsible for enforcing Title IX, and the Department remains committed to the full, fair, and effective enforcement of that statute. In your letter, you asked the Department to clarify how it intends to enforce Title IX and its implementing regulations. Specifically, your letter asked whether a school would be in jeopardy of losing funding or being sanctioned under Title IX if the school permitted faculty and staff to use biological pronouns or no pronouns at all. Your letter also asked whether the department document titled Instructions to the Field Complaints involved transgender students from June 6, 2017 supports such an interpretation. By itself, refusing to use transgender students' preferred pronouns is not a violation of Title IX and would not trigger a loss of funding or other sanctions. To the extent any prior OCR sub-regulatory guidance, field instructions, or commissions are inconsistent with this approach, they are inoperative. That means they don't have to be followed. However, and this is where Title IX actually does matter. However, sex-based harassment, including the predicated on sex stereotyping, is covered by Title IX. If it is sufficiently serious to deny or limit a student's ability to participate in or benefit from an education program or activity, thus harassing a student, including acts of verbal, nonverbal, or physical aggression, intimidation, or hostility based on the student's failure to conform to stereotypical notions of masculinity or femininity, can constitute discrimination on the basis of sex under Title IX in certain circumstances. Schools have a responsibility to protect students against such harassments. ORC will continue to address all complaints of sex discrimination against individuals, whether or not the individual is transgender, consistent with ORC's jurisdiction under the federal civil rights law it enforces. Every school and every school leader has a responsibility to protect all students and ensure every child is respected and can learn in an accepting environment. Thank you for your interest in ensuring a safe learning environment for all students that is free from discrimination. If you have any further questions or concerns, please contact Jordan Hardening, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, delegated the duties of Assistant Secretary for Legislation and Congressional Affairs at, here's the phone number, 202-401-0020. Sincerely, Kenneth L. Marcus, Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights.
It is actually a Title IX violation, and we can, as administrators, take action.
No, she just lied to me again, and she threatened me with action. What does action mean? Negative reviews, trying to fire me for not knowing the law. I know the law, but she doesn't understand the law. This is terrible. She is just digging herself into a deeper hole.
Against that staff member, we can, as a district, take action.
Did you tell her about the lawsuit that took place in Kansas?
No.
Okay, that exact thing happened in Kansas. It was just recently, actually, and they ended up putting a teacher on leave for like 3 days, I think. It was paid leave, and then it ended up going to court, and the district ended up having to pay the teacher about $100K because they've come to realize that the state cannot compel speech. And so if somebody does not want, it was always a religious thing too, where if it goes against their religion, they can't, it's the establishment clause. And so the establishment clause prevents the schools from saying, we are going to do this and your religion doesn't.
I bring up the establishment clause here because I am nearly 100%, it's probably 99.9% sure that Marxism, and especially queer Marxism, where all of this pronoun theater bullshit has come from, is actually a Gnostic religion. And when the district, actually, when these administrators are telling us that we have to speak the pronouns, it's like religious tenets, and they can't do that. They can't establish a religion in a government facility like this. It's against the law. It's against the Constitution.
It was really weird. You can read, if you want to go read it. It's actually a fascinating case study. But
I don't know what Kansas law is for work.
It was a federal judge,
right,
so it was a constitutional thing.
But states also have rights, and is
they passed
right
some
to
kind
work.
of new. Yeah.
So you can actually be removed from your position without the same restrictions, and that is something that you're agreeing to when you agree to work.
Is Kansas?
Well, she's not wrong about right to work states, but what she's missing here is that she cannot fire me because of a constitutional violation on her part. That's a wholly different thing, and that can she's violating my constitutional rights. Well, she wants to. I don't think she has quite yet, but she very well could. Maybe she has. I'm going to have to talk to a lawyer.
So not a right to work? I don't really remember.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I know that not all states are.
Yeah.
But I know my voice is not really being heard very much in this discussion right now, which is, it's not sitting well with me.
This guy's a narcissist. This is not about him at all. It has nothing to do with his voice needing to be heard, and no one's stopping him from speaking. For fuck's sake, he's the principal. What's wrong with you, man? You're just sitting there letting this lady basically just tell me she wants to violate my First Amendment right, possibly the Establishment Clause. You should be saying something.
There's three things I wanted to accomplish today. I wanted you to understand and give you literature, which I know you'll look at because I know you're very well read. I don't, and it does not have the ability to deviate from those expectations. We don't.
Completely wrong. You have an obligation, an oath to uphold the Constitution. And like I said, like the Nuremberg trials, if you just say, hey, I'm just following orders, that's not a defense in court.
I would prefer in the future that if you're in disagreement about something that we discuss in a meeting.
You mean a struggle session like this where you're not even listening to a single word I'm saying? You have an agenda, and that's all that matters. Yet anyone who agrees with you has a free platform in our meetings to say whatever the fuck they want.
Rather than, and I know that there's better ways of putting it, but I call it putting someone on blast.
I fucking hate DPDs. It's just so bad. Use some real words to describe what you're trying to say.
Instead of sharing that opinion, objectionable opinion.
Way to minimize me. And it's not an opinion, it's fact. But you don't know because you don't know anything about what you're talking about. You've never read queer theory. He's never read Judith Butler. You don't know who Marx is. You don't know anything about any of this, and yet you're telling me that you're the one who set the social worker up to bring this stuff to the table. You don't even know it's a fucking religion. Where
everybody now is impacted by that. That you come and speak to one of us, or you make an opportunity to go speak with the individual privately, where you can have a deeper, richer dialogue. Because I see that most times you're seeking to understand the perspective of someone else.
Yeah.
I'm always seeking to understand, unlike him, who is always seeking not to understand. The problem here isn't I'm trying to understand, it's that I understand too much, and he understands too little, and he doesn't understand the danger.
This meeting today was not to put you on blast.
Another lie, because yes it was.
This was not to read you the riot act.
Another lie, because yes it was.
It was to say, this is what
If he were honest, he would have said, this is what we choose to follow.
we have to follow.
Even though you guys
It was to say to you, in the future, if there's things of disagreement, I would rather you have the conversations with us
We've been there and done that and tried that. It doesn't work. That's why this happened.
than to do it in that form where people may or may not be in agreement with you and everybody walks away feeling they just not well about how that meeting ended.
I agree, I didn't feel well about it.
I never feel well when someone is trying to force Gnostic Marxism down my throat. It's just never going to be a good thing.
And I would always ask you, as I ask my own kids, what do we hope to gain from that response?
There was plenty to gain. I was pointing out the truth and making sure that everyone understood that this is unacceptable behavior, that we are not going to be forced out of our First Amendment right and forced to speak by people acting as government agents.
There was nothing to gain yesterday. All it did was upset people.
This man has never read Herbert Marcuse's Repressive Tolerance. He's doing it. He's just been like indoctrinated into this, and now he just does it normally, naturally. It's disgusting.
When you could have sought your answers in a different forum that were more private and more purposeful. And I would ask you to do that in the future.
Try to remember too, it was more like a guttural kind of like visceral response to something that I find so deeply troubling.
But I would ask you as an educated man.
As an educator.
Wow, what condescending assholes. I cannot even believe it. It's ridiculous. They were treating me like a child. I'm now wondering if this is how they treat the children at the school behind closed doors. They sound well practiced.
To show some reserve.
I do show that reserve. But there are times when, if that happens, it's probably one of my prime triggering hot button topics that it's really difficult when I'm not prepared for that kind of thing to be kind of explosive that way.
And maybe, I don't know this for a fact, but maybe you felt comfort in the fact that somebody else was sharing their discontent with it, and it gave you fuel to share your voice. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it was almost like you guys were in unison. And
yes, moral men are often in unison, and when we see what we can call child abuse happening, or people wanting child abuse to happen, we were in unison. When someone is telling us that they want us to affirm a child's mental illness,
it left people feeling not good about the way that meeting ended, and we did not have to let it go that way.
Wow, poor baby. Your agenda was foiled. How sad for you.
Thirdly,
what happened to him saying, I'm not punitive, and now he's threatening me with punitive actions on my evaluations? Especially for them wanting to violate my First Amendment. Uh-oh.
These are areas in all of our evaluations in culture and climate and professionalism that can be weighed in our evaluations around creating an environment of acceptance and safety for all kids. Now, do I think any of my staff deliberately create an unsafe environment for children? No, I don't think any of us. I think all of us.
So what was the purpose of bringing it up then? Curious.
Truly care about our kids.
Yeah, just some of us care about the kids in different ways. Some of us don't want to affirm mental illness or see kids go through genital mutilation or chemical castration. But some of them are caring people that care about kids, and they want to affirm their delusions, and they do want to see them go through genital mutilation and chemical castration.
But we all bring our own perspectives and things in that may or may not be appropriate for the school.
Yeah, what's appropriate for minor children that can't get a tattoo or a piercing, they can't get their own medication, they can't do much of anything without parental consent, but we want to affirm a gender that leads towards potential chemical castration or genital mutilation?
And what I would ask, just like I may have
How do
religious
difference?
Well, I think if it's something that is in question in terms of it's raising a question mark in your mind.
Nope, I'll let you in on a secret. I am high-functioning autism. Those kind of things, they just don't go through my brain. I wouldn't know the difference, and you can't just will somebody to start doing that kind of thing. I've never have. I don't know that I ever will.
Just like I would tell a student who doesn't know if something is acceptable at school,
Okay.
come talk to me first about it. Come talk to one of us, and let's process through it. So at least you know where it stands in your ability to make a choice around that. Because sometimes we don't know when that's going to occur. But I mean, I would always ask you to
Pretty sure I have a deficit there.
seek.
I don't know the difference a lot of times.
Well,
And I don't know that that would be a thing that would be offensive until it actually happens.
you
Unfortunately.
told me yesterday
What he says next is not the same thing. It's totally not the same thing.
you make a conscious choice in these non-binary situations
Always
to
have.
always address the kid by the name they wish to be called. You don't get into the pronoun piece, but you just call them by the name they've asked to be called. I said that, right, that may be okay for you, but I know others here that struggle in regular dialogue
Yeah.
with keeping their semantics. Those resources are for people that are trying to do the right thing but sometimes struggle.
Is it the right thing? Is telling the kids that a little boy can be a little girl, or that a little girl can be a little boy, and it can change day to day? You're telling me that's not delusional? Wow.
And it's simply, if it's going to help you, it helps you. If it's not, you're not inclined to read it.
No.
But this stuff
Yeah.
we all have to abide by, whether we want to read it or not.
Wrong again. More browbeating. Pathetic.
And when it comes to adults, if we're talking about adults in our work environment,
Yeah, like, right? Versus an adult,
our-
versus a dude, as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned.
Damn, she's dumb. She doesn't even realize I call everybody a dude. Girls, boys, dude, from where I came from, it just means like, hey, person.
But when it comes to children and children not being of age to make consent for anything in their life, and for them, I'll be honest with you, when I hear pronouns, I see it as a gateway drug to hormone replacement therapy, which ends up in like genital mutilation. And if you notice, by the time people are 25, obviously their frontal cortex is mostly developed, and their full personality and whatever gender they would associate with would be pretty solidified. When kids are younger, when you look at a lot of the research when they start taking hormone replacement therapy, it ends up interfering with a lot of the endocrine system, a lot of the neural development in the frontal cortex. And these things you never get back. And a lot of the kids that I have some friends who do interviews on YouTube, and one of the most fascinating ones that has been of the last year, since a lot of this has taken place, is a lot of these individuals that did get this kind of thing accepted through high school and into their mid-20s, and then their brain kind of switched and they realized that they really were just gay, and they now have gone through all of this body modification. The hormones are all out of whack because it's not natural to do these kind of things, and a lot of them are in great depressed states, and then they come out and they give these like 3-hour interviews. There's multiple ones on there, and
Right.
It breaks my heart to like think that if we as adults for kids are saying yes, this is okay, when the studies actually show that the majority of these transgender youth often, I mean, it's a high percentage are actually autistic. There's a big study that just came out with like almost 4,000 participants over a course of a very long time, and people with autism often have these queer inklings throughout their entire life, and they're more, that's
Right.
part of it.
And I hear that, but as an educator, what is our role in that? Our role is
role
very
is
limited
not-
in what we can do.
And this is the crux of it all. The point is that as educators, we don't need to be doing any of this. We don't need to be playing pronoun theater. We don't need to be affirming anyone's delusional gender, whatever, bending as it happens day to day. This is for their parents to decide. This isn't for fucking teachers to decide. It never has and it never should be.
Yes.
with that. We have mental
Parent
health
involvement.
but we have
Yeah.
mental health here, very good
Like-
mental health.
Yeah, and they have brought that
process.
up. They
Yeah.
have brought up
Yeah.
the fact that there is research that say not every child who is questioning
Yeah.
sticks with that decision. So they
Yeah.
have talked about that, but that's where it's even more important for us to know
Mhm.
our roles, which is not to get into those weeds.
Did she just agree with me? Because that's what the meeting was about, is getting into the fucking weeds and telling us that we have to use preferred pronouns, telling everyone that their First Amendment doesn't exist and that they're going to get the fuck on board and they need to read these resources. Ridiculous. And the dialectic progresses. Bring forth the contradictions.
Those are family
That's why I don't play
discussions.
any of those. That's why I
Yeah.
just used the
But-
name.
But
instead.
those are family discussions,
Yep.
and if a student feels like anyone is resisting, we had a kid who came in a couple of years ago. She had been our student the year before. She came in 3 days into the school year. I want to be identified as male. Here's my name.
Here's where I tricked her into admitting that the kids do not have the power because they're minors and only their parents can do this, and only until they're 18, and only if they go to a judge to have it legally changed. So if kids can't do any of this thing legally, why would we have to give up our free speech and be forced to use the pronouns that they can't even choose for themselves because they're minors?
Can they change this on the school's records?
We can put it on a nickname. They cannot legally, we can't legally change their name in IC.
Why is that?
Until
What is the?
they are 18 and they go to court. It's like any name change.
Yeah.
They
They
have
have
to
to
be
be an
18.
adult. They have to be an adult.
They have to be an
So
adult
I
to
can
make
go
choices
and
like
change
that.
my name to,
I just had to reiterate it that they can't do anything until they're an adult, and even then sometimes they have to go to a judge for it. I can't believe it.
Santa Claus
Absolutely.
as an adult if I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to.
So
But so she came in, and if we had put up big barriers or refused or made a big deal out of it,
yeah,
I've never made a big deal out of it. I just used their pronoun that refers to their sex because there's only a binary in pronouns. You're either male or you're female, and you're not assigned that at birth. It's just, that's what the doctor observed. It's a biological fact.
then that would have been a wall prohibiting an open, honest conversation. Our social worker called their parents, said, hey, just wanted you to know we had this conversation. You might want to follow up on that at home. Parents had the conversation. The kid came in the next day and said, nah, I'm back to my name. I want to identify as female. I'll think about that possibly in the future, but this is where I am. I'm good with that. If we ever communicate,
Sometimes kids need a little disapproval because we're the adults and our job is to help guide children to safety, to safe behaviors, and help them build their own brains because they can't, because they're kids, they don't know any better. And so we need to give them guidance. So for her to say we don't give guidance, that's a load of shit.
disapproval, and our kids are really good at reading us.
sure.
If we ever communicate that, they get that feeling from us. For one thing, that's going to close the door for us to be persons of trust.
Kids trust adults that are consistent and caring, but sometimes disapproval is part of how they learn their lessons, and we don't affirm everything they do. Those are the adults that want to be their friend. We're not their fucking friend. We're the adult, we're the teacher. We can disapprove sometimes to help them know the difference between right and wrong.
Of course.
With them.
Yeah.
And in a school setting, we can't afford to do that because that
absolutely.
communication
Uh-huh.
creates an unsafe environment.
Another Marxist buzzword, unsafe environment. No, it doesn't. We are creating a safe environment for kids by sometimes disapproving of the things they do because the things they're doing are not healthy for them. And I cannot stand it. I hate that. When they say unsafe environment, it's not what you think they mean. Whenever a Marxist uses the words, I feel unsafe, what they're doing is they're using those words as a club to beat you into submission and make you shut the fuck up.
I'm an individualist. I treat every individual as their own person. So I don't see skin color, I don't see gender or sex, I don't see any of that. I don't care to see any of that. I only see Martin Luther King was one of my favorite guys.
Not really. I didn't really like Martin Luther King because he was a fucking communist. But I did like the thing he said about judging people for the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That was okay.
Content of their character. And that's the only thing that matters to me. And the kids that we have here in the U Choose, I would say are some of the best kids I've ever worked with. And I don't think that I would ever have an issue or reason to make them feel uncomfortable because they're just children. I have the most, patience for children because they just don't know any better.
I would ask you to extend that olive branch of understanding with our adults in the building too, especially in these moments when we have strong opinions about something.
No, I'm done giving leadway to the adults he's talking about in the building. They act like little children, and they're not little children.
I would ask you to pull within your ability, which I know you have, because you're a kind person, to pull back and reserve that comment, knowing that it may not be received the way you want it to be received, and to either process with us so that we can move forward and allow you to have that opportunity to say, well, here's where I'm at with it, I'm frustrated, whatever. I want to make sure we're supporting you, or we can sit down with that person and have a conversation, and that could just be genuine between you and that person. But I think we have to be careful about putting it out there in the form it was put out yesterday, because the assumption is not everybody's going to be on the same page with that. And then people walk away feeling fragmented and feeling like we're not all playing in the same sandbox together.
More repressive tolerance. Bummer.
We have to be unified in our approach with kids. Yes, we all are going to have genuine beliefs, genuine religious affiliations. We're going to have things that drive us as a person.
Sure. Yeah.
I do, I'm sure you do, I know Becca does. But we have always maintained very clear lines of what can and can't be in school. We may not support the ideology of public school genuinely as a person. We may not support any of it. But we've agreed to work here and receive a living, and we have to uphold the rules.
There he goes again, talking like a Marxist. Receiving our living. No, I earn my living through my work. There's a huge difference. If he receives his living, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know why I'd even say that, unless he's a Marxist. He doesn't even know he's a Marxist because he's never read Marx.
Of the district. My job, his job, is always to put you in a place for success. If we disagree, we have conversations. We provide you with the guidelines that we're following. We're not creating this. We don't create this. We are expected to follow it.
But we're just following orders. We're not culpable.
Any person that signs a contract and works for our district is expected to follow board policy.
True, as long as it doesn't contradict the Constitution. Period. Then we follow the Constitution first, because that was the oath we gave to get the credential to even work in the district.
It's written. Does policies change? They do, but there's processes for that as well.
Of course.
It's not going to occur in the academy. Those are loftier processes that happen through Board of Education.
I will work on all of that.
Yeah.
But there's one thing I'd like you guys also to do too. Will you be willing to maybe do some research into where the pronoun and where the queer theory came from?
Here's the thing. I could do some research, however...
No, it's a lie. She never does. I've given her so much research into really important topics, and then months and years go by and she just placates me and pretends like, oh, I didn't have time, or oh, I looked at it, and then she didn't really look at it. She never does.
My personal
Foucault.
beliefs
Mhm.
do not get to come out my mouth in this building. So there are a lot of things I know. There are a lot of things I believe.
Oh my god, I was totally just bullshitting him here because they're the worst fucking at it. It's like if they hadn't realized throughout this entire conversation that what they're telling me is a complete bold-faced lie, they think I'm fucking dumb, which is pathetic and sad.
You're really good at hiding it. I think even you're really good too, but I think you're even better than him at hiding it.
I've developed over the years a
I
good
know.
poker face.
You do have a good poker face.
So
She really does not have a good poker face. You can see everything in her eyes and in her face. And I'm autistic. I'm really bad at reading faces, but like, she doesn't have a poker face at all.
that is my dad has more integrity than any person I've ever met.
Just like when Joe Biden said that Hunter Biden is the person with the most integrity he's ever met. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I chose to work in a public school. And so I have a lot of deep beliefs.
And you wear them like a neon sign hung around your neck all the time. You're a very, very radical leftist, probably a Marxist. I would guarantee a Marxist. You have talked about how you love Marx.
And none of them get to exit my mouth. Here.
Another lie.
So any knowledge I might have is not going to impact the way I do my job.
Another lie.
Because the responsibility that I have
I forgot.
undertaken, yeah,
What are you doing here?
is, especially as an administrator, is to make sure we're sticking with the policies that align with our state and federal laws that our district has created. And so
We wouldn't be having this conversation if you had, but we're having this conversation because you don't. If you remember back to the beginning of this, when I read the district's policy, it says nothing about compelled speech because they're not dummies. They have lawyers, and lawyers realize that you can't do that. And if you do, you can get sued.
yeah. So maybe when I need a little light reading.
Oh my. Light reading? She's in for a major surprise if she ever does pick up one of these books, because I don't think she's smart enough to understand any of it.
I will check into it, but please know that it won't change my practice.
Of course it won't change your practice, because you're a fucking radical leftist, and you think this stuff is true.
I know.
So-
but at least your perspective on what I would say.
I told you before, I'm happy to look at it. I'm not going to go into probably the depth you do. I'll look at it in terms of trying to better understand where you're coming from.
A lie. He never does. I keep sending them things that are important, even things that are not controversial. They never read anything I send them. And I actually mean never. Like, I'm not just being hyperbolic. They never read anything I send them.
But I agree with Becca. Whether I agree with it or not, it's not part of who I am at school.
Complete lie.
I just think if you knew what I know, I don't know that you don't know what I know, but I'm making an assumption here. I think if I'm just going to say it, if I think you knew what I knew, and the district were asking this to be a thing, I think you would have presented it in a different way. I think that would be,
But once again,
in my mind,
it
how
wasn't
it would have been.
presented in a way that you were expected to do it. It was a resource because
Complete lie.
we have a growing population of kids identifying this way, and I want to make sure that if teachers have questions or frustrations, that there are resources they can look at. They may say, I've got a grasp of it. I treat every kid the same, like you just said.
always.
But other people they're more calculated in how they want to respond because, like I said, even said yesterday, sometimes I just want to know because when I slip up, I feel bad.
Of course he's going to slip up. These kids change their gender all the time. They do it because they want to gain power over the teachers. I know which kids are doing it too. And they only do it with the teachers they know they can get away with it. These students have never once done it to me or to my friend because they know better.
I think most people feel bad because they're trying really hard. I call that positive intent.
Yeah.
There's a difference between positive intent and then me saying, I'm going to call you she because I know that pisses you off.
I would never call them she to piss them off. I just would call a girl, a female, she because that's the sex. And like I said before, sex and gender are not different. It's a binary.
Or because on Infinite Campus it says you were born a female.
Wow, one of the only true things she said, well, maybe not the only one, but one of the only true things she said, born a female. Yep, that's right. When you're born a female, you're a she. That's just what it is.
They have that right.
Do you think that genders are a social construct? Are you on that camp, or that side?
I'm not going to tell you. I am your evaluator.
Yeah, I set her up. I was telling her that she has a wonderful poker face, and I can't tell any of it, but she's like an open book. Of course she thinks it's a social construct. She's a radical leftist. It's no big surprise. And just for the way she looked when I asked her that, she gave it all away. She's not crafty about it at all.
True.
And just like I will not tell our kids what I believe, I am your evaluator. And I will not tell you
that. I admire
what I believe.
your ability
to raises an important part.
She had no idea I was even mocking her. It's super funny. I don't respect her.
There are areas.
I feel you.
There are areas in the evaluation, in the areas of professionalism and culture and climate that talk about these things. These are growth areas for you. I believe you're very capable.
Capable of what? Falling in line? I think that's what he really means.
Yeah.
But I want to be honest, that if anybody beyond a conversation like this was to continue to poke the bull on these things, it would be reflected in an evaluation. It would have to be.
Fine.
Here he goes. Remember, I'm not a punitive man, but I'm going to be punitive if you poke the bull. Well, if they're going to be punitive because they expect me to let them compel my speech, fuck around and find out. Try it. Let's see what happens. I don't mind taking you to court.
This will result this is not a punishment or a detriment.
Oh my God, that doublespeak might work on the kids, but fuck, man, really? Come on, really? Okay.
But this is today's discussion will be a letter of understanding, so that.
Oh, you didn't think I was gonna leave the letter out of this, did you? Just wait, it's coming.
You know exactly what we discussed, where we were coming from. We kind of get where you're coming from.
Another lie. They don't get where I'm coming from at all, and they don't give a fuck.
And moving forward, like I said, it was three things. It was making sure that you have the literature, and I'm not just blasting you with.
So am I on blast or am I not on blast? Because you just said a while ago I was not on blast, but this meeting wasn't to be on blast. But now you're blasting me with school board policy? Make up your mind, man. The sad thing is they didn't even get the school board policy correct. This is their policy.
Well, school board policy.
I think I read all this last night.
And you may have.
I'm pretty sure.
2, there is proper recourse for disagreeing because we all have different opinions and thoughts on things, and we do respect that.
No, they don't respect that. Another lie.
But there's a proper form, so I've shared with you what I would prefer you to do if you're in disagreement. I'd rather you vet that through either me or if it was just a matter of you saying, hey, you got a minute, I just want to talk about this with you. As long as you understand, and when you're vetting a process with somebody, you're not going in there with the idea that you're going to convert their thinking. You're going to respect their stance on things.
The whole reason we're having this argument is because I don't respect their stance on this thing, because it's not a respectable thing to have a stance on.
And hopefully they will respect yours as well.
This struggle session is proof that they don't respect me.
Because that's a professional dialogue. I would hope we all can do that. Some of us are better at it than others.
Yeah.
And then lastly, just that it is an evaluative area.
Wow, for not being a punitive man, he sure brings up punitive consequences in your evaluative area quite a lot, if you hadn't noticed. Interesting, right?
That unfortunately we all have to adhere to, myself and Becca as well, in our leadership evaluations, that we have to make sure in our creating a safe environment for all kids is that they, number one, feel respected and received, and that they don't ever feel like a teacher holds them in contempt or animosity over personal choices. And I don't believe you have. Don't believe you have, because that doesn't sound like your character. I've known you for a couple of years now, and you've always been kind.
I'm very kind.
Except when people try to violate my constitutional rights, then I'm not kind.
But I also know that you feel very strongly about the things you feel very strongly about. It's not for me to criticize you.
If this struggle session wasn't jam-packed full of criticism, I don't know what the fuck is.
Because you're entitled to those thoughts, and you're entitled to think the way you want to think. But like Becca said, we all have things we think strongly about. We're not allowed to create a venue for it in a public school.
Not exactly true. We don't leave our constitutional rights at the door when we go to work. So, suck it.
We're just not.
I keep saying, I fear if you guys want a safe environment for kids is that by helping them think that chopping body parts off is going to solve problems, I don't find that being a safe environment.
But we're not
for children.
condoning that either. We're not going there with kids.
We're not.
I don't want that to be, like, as the dialectic progresses, this is the thing, is that wherever we are now, next year this will be the thing of the past, and the progression will continue
yes and no.
into this movement deeper.
I'm not wrong here. This was not a thing last year, and now it's a thing this year. And they don't just want preferred pronouns. Next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be told that we have to affirm hormonal castration, or we have to affirm genital mutilation. The dialectic never rests, and what's progressive today will be conservative tomorrow.
We brought up the example of homosexuality and how it has become more accepted.
Yeah.
I think they think I'm a bigot. Like, I don't like trans people, or I don't like gay people, after I just told them I'm an individualist and I don't even give a shit about any of that. I just think people are people, and I like nice people, and I don't like evil people like these people. I work with tons of gay kids, and I don't care if somebody wants to be trans, if it's actually a real trans person. Like, I just don't care. I just don't want to see it happening to kids until they're old enough to make that decision rationally.
I have not been to a public school that encourages students to be homosexual.
Totally.
It's a choice.
Wow, that was homophobic. Being gay is not a choice. It's something you're born with, biologically. Yikes. Another iron law of woke projection happening here? Probably.
I don't think it's a choice. I think it's innate.
And that is a development that is decades older.
I think it's wonderful
than this. And so I would not anticipate. I know there are people out there that fear the worst in every situation, but to me, I would not anticipate schools being any more influential in.
And in the same breath, she was just telling me that we need to affirm these kids' gender, which we didn't do before. Like, this was never even brought up, and it was just a personal thing. If people wanted to do it, that was wonderful. If they didn't want to do it, no one ever brought it up.
The transgender culture than they have been in the homosexual culture, because public schools have not pushed, hey, you ought to be gay. Oh, you're a boy, you're wearing pink, you must be gay. We don't push that.
Maybe she's just naive, because I've actually seen in the news that the GSA is prompting kids to be gay. There was an article saying that some of the schools were caught with audio promoting gayness to kids and trying to convert them. It was really weird. I never thought that would be a thing. I need to look for that article again. Maybe I'll do a cast on it if I can find it.
Totally.
And so I don't anticipate this free fall of us invading into decisions, choices that honestly don't involve us.
That's good to know. 'Cause my biggest fear isn't where it is now, it's where it could end up because it becomes
just
something
think of where
dangerous.
we have been with,
But trust the fact that we have an extensive mental health team here that supplies service to. We don't do deep therapy and counsel here.
Yeah.
However, some of these kids do go into their counselor in a safe environment, and they may share some of their reasonings, or because we don't solicit it, but they may share
usually
where
they trust.
It's still not the point of our therapists and counselors to direct those choices.
Now here's the thing, when the kids go into the meetings with these counselors, they're private meetings, and HIPAA will not allow anyone to talk about what's gone on in those meetings, especially if they're private. He shouldn't know if they are promoting it or aren't promoting it. So if he does know because someone's been talking, that's not so good.
It's simply to say, they'll provide opportunities for kids to seek additional services outside of school if they wish to. It's just giving kids pathways to answer their questions.
Wow, that was just a fascinating tell, because we do have a group of girls on hormone therapy. They're taking testosterone. I was listening the other day and they were complaining about the terrible side effects they were having from it. I wonder how they got the resources to have hormone therapy.
And in that process, they may find things about themselves that maybe deter them from going that direction, and then again they may find things that they find comforting in their choices that they're making.
Didn't we just get done discussing that children can't make choices like that for themselves because they're minors? Wow, what contradictions.
It's all we can do is hear them, and we have a mental health team to provide them with resources if they need it. But once again, it's never in terms of casting judgment or reflecting upon our own value system on the choices that they're making.
But are they making these choices on their own, or are they being groomed into making these choices? What do you think?
We can't do it. I know how strongly you feel about some of these things just from conversations we've had. And I'm sure other people have strong feelings about these things. It's simply we have to exercise our filters in a public school.
So if you're on board with the narrative, feel free to speak. If you're not on board with the narrative, shut the fuck up.
We have to. We have to.
And I would like to coach you on something.
Oh, you're going to coach me. Oh, you must be such a wise sage on the stage. Let's hear what you're going to say. Come on, give it to us.
And it is something that is not, it tends not to feel natural, but it's possible. When you have those visceral reactions, and this is true for most people, most of the time, if we're in that spot, we are not fully controlling the words that come out.
If this isn't the iron law of woke projection, I don't know what is.
The tone that comes out.
Sure.
And how people understand us.
Sure.
All I'm thinking when she's saying this is that she's just telling me about herself and her personal problems.
And so by taking that step back and biting holes in your tongue, writing something down, I've got to remember to say this later, you allow yourself to the time to be understood. Because I can tell you that there are staff members that understood from what you said yesterday that you were unwilling to respect our students' wishes about their identification.
I can't believe she just said that. Wow, that's insane.
And I'm telling you that because I didn't believe that because I know who you are. But when you don't have control of especially your tone, then people may understand a message that you're not meaning to convey.
I did have control of my tone. They just didn't like the message I had because it contradicted their philosophy of life, which is disgusting.
And so holding that in is, which is that expectation that we talked about if there's something that is incredibly offensive or bothersome to you, please wait and then talk to that person directly. Because especially the two of us, we know you. We know that you're not belligerent to our kids.
You're a deep
We
thinker.
know that you're not going to sacrifice our kids' sense of safety and comfort
Oh, never.
for
No.
for this.
She said for this, so she still is trying to get me to give up my free speech. She wants to compel my speech. This is her whole ploy, is to get me to compel the speech that she wants me to say as a government official. Wow, that's illegal.
But
I don't blame the kids at all for any of the choices that they're making in these kind of realms. I see them as just reflecting what society is bringing to them, and they don't really know. They're trying out stuff, but I don't. I mean, like Max is one of my most amazing students. Max is on point with like the art, with the music. That kid, brilliant. Wyatt, oh my God! If I had a class full of those kind of kids, like Wyatt plays violin at a pretty high level. Like, I mean, not a super high level, but like high school level.
You know if they come into your classroom and they feel valued by you,
Oh,
which
yeah.
I know you do.
Oh, totally.
You can move mountains with those kids.
Definitely. They're just all kids. Like I said, I don't make any distinction between whatever. I don't care about that part of them. It's not really important to me.
But sometimes in that heat of the moment, things may be communicated, and I think yesterday was an example of that, where people walked away with a belief about you.
Too bad for them. If they've been working with me for as long, that number of years, and they still want to think the worst of me, fuck them. Yeah, fuck them.
That
I felt
is
the same.
not true.
I felt the same. I don't know that it's true, though, with how I felt about some of the things. I don't know that you guys know, like I said, the depth of what I'm talking about when it comes to critical queer theory and where it came from and what the purpose of it is. It hurts me deeply. I find it highly offensive. I don't know that I'll be able to work through. I can give you an alternative that when I feel those kind of things boiling up, that I will excuse myself and just leave.
Well,
Perfect.
Because that would probably be easier for me to remove the stimulus.
perfect.
Because you have
Okay.
access to the agenda and you know that I usually put it out on Sunday,
Yeah.
Monday morning at the latest. If there's something in there that's just like, maybe you just need clarity on, just reach out to one of us. And if it's something you say, I don't think I should be there for that,
Okay.
then we'll make it, we'll just
Okay.
make the opportunity
And if-
for you to be vacant.
And if
then-
something springs up or the conversation goes a way
I
you're
can-
not comfortable with, yes, please feel free to get up and walk out, and after that you can come and check in with us.
Okay.
Because it is better, we can't unsay words.
Sure.
We can't ungive that.
I'll give you some of my
conversation.
triggers if you guys want to have an idea. Anything Marxism, so anything that's critical theory, anything that has to do with dialectical progression. So all of these things to me, I find them to be the most un-American thing that could ever possibly be. And when I hear these things and I find them, like these were some of the things that were highly prevalent in my last school, in my last district. And when I saw things like, what was the one that they were doing, the restorative justice.
This is funny. They think they're doing restorative justice right now, but what they're really doing is more of a Maoist struggle session, and they don't know the difference.
I watched that over the course of 4 years destroy so many children. It was horrible. I don't know if they were doing it wrong or what it was, but I saw
They must have
kids
been
that
doing it
were...
wrong.
I knew this was going to be a trigger for her. I also know that the kind of restorative justice that they were doing at my last school was doing it to the T, exactly how it is supposed to be done.
that
I've seen it.
ended up committing crimes where some of them were shot and killed. I had another one that was denied the service because of the race he was. He was a white kid, and they were only giving it to the black kids. And so they ended up calling the cops. They took him away. He spent multiple months in jail, and then was out on bail for a very short time, and then disappeared and was gone. And then later I found out that they put him in prison. And for the same, actually less violent, it wasn't even violent, it was just the kid had brought a pocket knife to school and didn't realize he'd had it in his backpack because he lived in a tiny little apartment, hung it up on the one of the pegs to get it out of the way of his little siblings. And the kid was 18, and so he was legal to have it, all that, and he had forgotten over a weekend, and then just took his bag to school, and then he was opening it up, and then another kid saw it, and then the mayhem, and this kid didn't get any of the restorative justice. And other kids I saw bringing handguns to school, and they would literally take the handguns from the kids, go through the restorative justice system. When the kids would leave school, hand them back the handguns, and then that same weekend those kids took those handguns to a house to try to do a home invasion, and the homeowner ended up killing both of the boys with shooting them. And I knew all of those kids.
So you have a lot of trauma.
There's a lot of trauma when it comes to that kind of stuff.
And
so
unfortunately, any policy or practice can go awry.
These guys were like high-level professionals that were used all over the district to do these things, and it soured me to some of these practices.
They were high level that were used all over that district.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But like, because we have had way different experiences with restorative justice here.
Yeah.
And so any policy or practice is only as good
as
as
the
people who are exercising it.
Yeah.
And so,
you know the girl drama we've had here recently?
I don't know.
Well, we've had some girl drama the last few quarters, but we've done some conflict resolution practices with.
Yeah.
I've done them with various counselors and girls that were having issues.
Sure.
And we've been able to make them feel represented and be able to voice their opinions in an appropriate forum instead of screaming and resorting to violence and social media threats and all this other stuff.
Oh, wow.
And we've had good outcomes. Now, is anything perfect?
Wow.
No, I agree exactly with what it says. It's the quality of the people running the engagement.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I mean, I've had trauma around decisions. I've watched kids die in my school. I've watched a kid die right in front of me.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, I've seen all facets that have impacted my thoughts around corporal punishment, things like that.
Sure.
So, but once again, I have to always apply a filter when I'm at school.
If that's his idea of a filter, okay, I guess what I did pales in comparison, because the things I've heard come out of his mouth.
And make sure I understand is my actions or words in the best interest at this moment in time? And if not, do I have a resource to discuss this? Because as a person, sometimes I just need to process.
I do too.
And I think this is a more appropriate process. It doesn't have to be with both of us, or it could just be with the person you want to sit down and have dialogue with.
Sure.
But please make sure they're receptive to that dialogue.
Yeah.
Because just like with the conflict resolution, all parties have to be willing to have that discussion, or it becomes an unproductive discussion.
I've become better at that, but I still feel it's a deficit.
Which is something we can always help you with.
Yeah, being autistic can be difficult sometimes. It's hard to figure out if people don't really want to know the truth. And so I don't know how to talk to them sometimes without just being truthful. And a lot of times that just offends them.
Trust me, I'm aware that it happens. I just don't necessarily in the moment. It doesn't always click. I don't always have that, I don't know what they call it.
So in summary,
with
future agendas, if there's something that sparks a reaction, make us aware of it so that we can create that opportunity. And sometimes maybe it's just an explanation. Maybe you're like, well, I don't know what this means, but I'm asking because I don't want to be in a place where it's going to trigger something with me.
Yeah.
So that we can be sensitive to that.
Thank you.
And have a conversation.
Yeah.
I want you to feel good about the conversation. I don't want you to walk away feeling like,
At this point, I was just like, I need to wrap this shit up. I'm just done.
The administration's out to get me.
I feel like you have
I don't have
good intentions.
Neither one of us have negative intent. But unfortunately, when we have we have a lot of intelligent people working in a building very closely, and we're not always going to see things the same way. And we have to find ways to navigate these things so that people don't feel this separation. We're all here for the same reason. There has to be a cohesiveness to that.
Sure.
You know, it goes with standing in the hallway during transitions. It goes with greeting our kids by their names. It goes with, you know, taking the special extra efforts to make sure our kids supported, knowing that their world is crumbling. I think we are all compassionate adults here. And sometimes we sometimes get in each other's way. And we have to be careful.
It's part of life.
Because it usually trickles to my office or her office when there's discontent.
I know.
Because the other hard part about having conversations...
Always?
Usually?
Yeah. Because the other hard part about having conversations in a close-knit staff group is that we don't know how to talk to each other when we get sideways with each other. It becomes uncomfortable. So the first thing you do is you find the AP or the principal, and you come in the office and you go, "Bleh!"
I've never once done that, but I know who does do that, and they're the Marxist.
Fix it. And that's what's happened yesterday on multiple occasions, is people came in here and went, "Bleh! Fix it."
I'm sorry. That's a sad thing.
I don't think that was your intent when it came out, but that's what happened.
It interests me that people have known me, like most of the teachers here, maybe not the new ones, but they've known me for as long as you have, and they
sometimes
still
makes it harder to talk about.
Think about me. It's like they have the worst interpretation of that. It's curious because I never do that. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt generally, except yesterday I wasn't directing it necessarily at I was directing it at the idea.
It's how it played out, and it's how it came out.
Did she feel attacked? Because I'll go talk to her.
You know what?
I'll be honest
that
with
would be a question for
I'll go talk to her because I wasn't directing it at her.
I told her that she handled it eloquently, but it felt like a blast the way it was interpreted by others.
One of the things I know you know. We tend to give people more benefit of the doubt when we have more personal connections and know them more.
True enough.
And one of the lovely characteristics of autism is you don't always build across a wide spectrum those social connections.
True.
So, you know, yes, you've worked here for years. However, without the personal connect, and I'll tell you, there are staff members that still will say something and it'll send them off and they completely misinterpret what we say. And so it's not always a personal connection thing. Sometimes it's a where they are thing.
I agree with that. I can see that.
But
especially during the day, during whatever happened. We don't know what happened at home. We don't know what the drive was like. I get some of those things.
Or what's going on, and
Fair enough. Well,
I know we destroyed your plan hour.
Oh, that's okay.
Quiet before the herd leaves the building for a little while.
Well, I'll talk to I want to see if
if you process and you
wants to talk.
And if you process after all this and you want to come back and have conversations with either or both of us, you know that's just, we'll make it happen. I'm not upset. I just felt like we needed to be on the same page with moving forward.
Yeah, I was curious to see where you guys were at with that, and I think I get a feel for it. So
I'm sure you caught my stress last night as I was sitting in my car.
I didn't mean to stress you. You got enough problems on right now.
That's neither here nor there, and that's probably something I shouldn't share with staff. But the human side of me is that I care tremendously about everybody in this building, and this one of my personal conflicts is my health right now. So it is.
I forget those.
It is hard.
I'm not living it.
It is hard, but it's a reality. There's so much energy I draw from this building, the kids and the staff.
Now I'm going to read to you the letter that they called the Letter of Understanding. And it goes like this. February 1st, 2023. My name. Thank you for meeting with us on January 31st, 2023 to discuss recent concerns. This email will serve as a follow-up to the concern discussed. Number 1. The public response, including verbiage, tone, and timing you gave regarding LGBTQIA plus student gender identification resources, which were shared in the January 30th staff meeting at school and by the administrator's request. As we discussed, this behavior can have an effect on students, staff, and culture. With this email, the following professional behaviors need to be met and substantiated. Number 1, make sure you are familiar with the school board's transgender guidance and the school board's equal educational opportunities. Number 2, please come to either the speaker or administration directly following the meeting if you ever have questions, concerns, or strong opinions about information or resources shared. Another option is to leave the room if materials that you believe is offensive to you is on the agenda. 3, make sure you are doing your best to respect students and their identification as part of teacher expectations and evaluations, as outlined in the aforementioned district documents. My name in the January 31st meeting, and with this email, we are giving you an opportunity to reflect and gain perspective. As we discussed, please be aware that the expectations outlined in this email are integral components of our evaluation process. Thank you for your time, Principal and VP. Well, that actually sounds punitive, and that sounds like a threat. It sounds like they left this intentionally vague so that they could cover their ass. Because when I look at this, it doesn't really mean anything. It says my response, my verbiage, the verbiage that they probably are talking about is that I identified what they were doing by trying to compel us to use preferred pronouns. That is a queer Marxism or queer Gnosticism. My tone, to be honest, like I have a very flat affect, and my tone doesn't really ever change much, even when I'm upset. The timing, well, the timing was then, it was now. When it was taking place, people needed to know. I wasn't just going to sit there and take it. I don't have to just sit there and take it. And regarding the LGBTQIA plus student gender identification resources, when I looked at the resources, maybe I should read those. Maybe next I'll think about it if this is already running very late. They were very generic, and all the ones from the district were just requests. They just said, oh, this would be nice if you could do this, but we're just requesting. It's just a request. And the other one was like straight from one of these queer Marxist propaganda sites, where they were talking about like allyship, and it was Marxism. It was like putting these people into like classes and saying some people have privilege and some people are the oppressors, and it was very Marxist. So maybe I'll find that and bring that up again in a different topic or episode. But my biggest concern with all of this isn't the queer Marxism stuff. I mean, I hate that. My biggest concern with this is that I'm pretty certain that the Marxists don't care about queer people at all, but they're using it as the pebble in the shoe, and this is going to be their door into getting rid of free speech in America. They don't want people to have free speech because it allows me to do the things I'm doing right now, and they find that abhorrent because it puts a lie to everything that they're trying to sell you. It puts a lie to the religion that is Marxism. Because if I can speak out and everyone else can speak out, their words start to mean less. Their words can be countered by my words, and you can start to understand why this is a detriment to the U.S. Constitution and to Western values. For now, I'm going to leave it where it is. I may edit this later. This is already getting very late. But I do appreciate you listening to the Objective Epistemology Podcast, and there may be an addendum to this. But for right now, I will see you in the next podcast. Thank you.